In late 2023, it was kinda exciting to visit my family after a long stay at my college, which was out of town. I hadn't seen them in 3 months, and the thought of my mom's cooking and dad's stories made the bus ride feel more like an adventure than a commute. I took the 11:45 p.m. bus from the city bus station. It was supposed to drop me at the small town where my family lived, about 2 hours away. The bus was mostly empty, except for a few night owls and me, which was perfect because I could finally catch up on my reading without interruptions. The bus driver was a middle-aged man with a friendly smile who introduced himself as Mark. He seemed genuinely cheerful, telling jokes and pointing out landmarks as we drove through the empty streets. The first hour was completely normal, the kind of mundane bus ride that happens every day across America. But around 1 a.m., when we were about halfway through the journey on that winding stretch of highway that cuts through the hills, things started feeling off. That's when I noticed the old uncle sitting in the back row. He was wearing a traditional button-down shirt and had a white beard that reached his chest, but something about him felt wrong. His hands were moving rapidly as if he was talking, but I couldn't hear anything through the bus's humming engine. I assumed he was on a phone call, but then I realized there was no phone to his ear. His mouth was moving, his fingers were gesturing, but there was complete silence except for the bus's mechanical sounds. I tried to ignore it and focus on my book, but the longer I looked, the more certain I became that he was speaking. The language seemed too complex for any English dialect I knew. It had the rhythm of English, but the structure of something entirely foreign. My English is pretty good, but this was like listening to someone speak in a language that my brain couldn't process. It was unsettling, like my mind was trying to translate something that shouldn't exist. The middle seat next to the old man was occupied by a young girl of maybe 8 or 9 years old. She was playing with a doll that looked unnervingly real, porcelain skin and painted blue eyes that seemed to follow you around the room. But what got me was her smile. She kept looking at the doll, and every time she did, the doll's painted smile seemed to widen just a fraction. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I could swear the corners of those painted lips were curving upward more than they should be. The girl didn't speak or make any sounds. She just kept smiling at her doll while the old man spoke in that incomprehensible language. Other passengers started getting on at the few stops along the way, mostly night shift workers and travelers, but nobody seemed to notice the strange duo in the back. They just took their seats and stared straight ahead, as if the old man's silent conversation and the girl's smiling doll were completely normal. The bus conductor, who had been sitting silently in his seat near the front, suddenly stood up. He moved with a strange stiffness, like his joints hurt, but his face remained completely blank. He walked down the aisle and stood directly in front of the old man and the girl. The old man didn't stop his conversation. He just kept moving his hands and mouth as if the conductor wasn't there. The conductor watched him with those dead eyes for a full minute, then turned and walked back to his seat without saying a word. That's when I noticed the bus's GPS display, which was showing our route and estimated arrival time. The route kept changing. Instead of our planned destination, it was now showing stops that didn't exist on any map I knew. Riverside Temple appeared, then disappeared. Abandoned school flashed and vanished. The bus kept driving straight, as if following invisible signs only visible to the driver. Mark, the driver, hadn't spoken since we left the city. He just kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel, occasionally glancing at the mirror. But now I noticed his reflection in the rearview mirror. He wasn't looking at the road behind us, but straight ahead, through the windshield as if watching something far in the distance. His smile from earlier was gone, replaced by that same dead, staring expression as the conductor. The girl in the back kept playing with her doll, and I swear the doll's smile was getting wider with every passing minute. Her painted eyes seemed to be following me whenever I looked in their direction. I tried to focus on my phone, pretending to scroll through messages, but every time I glanced up, those painted eyes were locked on me. The bus was approaching the final stop. the one where I was supposed to get off. My heart was racing, and I was already gathering my backpack and preparing to stand up. The old man finally stopped his silent conversation, closed his mouth, and turned his head directly toward me. His eyes weren't looking at me. They were looking through me, as if seeing something behind me. The conductor stood up again, walking slowly down the aisle like he was moving through water. He didn't look at me, just kept walking straight to the back of the bus. The girl finally looked up from her doll and met my eyes with that same creepy smile. The doll in her hands was now smiling so wide that I could see the tiny painted teeth. I stood up and walked toward the front of the bus, trying to pretend I was in a hurry. Mark glanced at me in the mirror, and for the first time, I saw it. His smile. It wasn't friendly or cheerful anymore. It was the same dead, empty smile as the conductor's, the same haunted expression as the old man's. He was smiling at me, but his eyes were looking past me, through me, at something behind. My stop was coming up. The bus slowed down and started turning toward the familiar road where my family lived. I could see the streetlights and the houses we passed every day. Everything looked normal, but I knew it wasn't. I reached for the stop button, my hand shaking so badly that I almost missed it. As the bus pulled into the stop, I turned to look back one last time. The old man was standing up, his hand reaching toward me. The girl was still sitting there, but now the doll was facing backward, its painted smile still impossibly wide. The conductor was standing right behind the old man, and Mark was watching me in the mirror with that same dead smile. I jumped off the bus and didn't look back. I heard the doors close and the engine start, but when I turned around, the bus was already disappearing down the road, its headlights growing smaller until they vanished around the bend. I walked home, every shadow looking like it was moving, every sound making me jump. My family was already asleep when I reached the house, and I didn't want to wake them up with my terror. I went straight to my room, locked the door, and sat on my bed until morning. In the morning, I tried to call the bus company to ask about that route, but they told me that bus 47, the one Mark drove, had been out of service for 6 months. The driver had died in a strange accident, and the bus had been decommissioned. I never took a night bus again, and sometimes, when I'm walking home late at night, I still hear phantom engine sounds and see phantom headlights in my rearview mirror.